3, so we're 3 minutes late, and I think that's because of me, but I'll call the meeting to order. Is Trevor here? Yeah, Trevor is here. Trevor, have you met everyone around the table?
I have not yet.
All right.
Majority.
So why don't we start the meeting with doing an introduction around the table? So obviously you're Trevor, if you want to say hello to the group, and then we'll move around.
Yeah, so I joined on the 26th with the municipality as the climate change action coordinator. So I've just been doing the onboarding and familiarizing myself with the community. I've met some individuals already on the committee, just having a coffee, and I'm making myself available Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm up in the township, so between the normal hours, and we don't have to meet at the town office. We can go anywhere that's reasonable, not kayaking to some island, but anywhere that's reasonable, we can go and have coffee and chat if you want to chat about anything. So I'm making myself open to that.
So just to let you know, Trevor, I have a spare kayak if you want to kayak to the island. So,
that's good to know.
Yeah. So who wants to go next? I see Luke on the screen. Do you want to go, Luke?
Sure. Trevor, yeah, we briefly met during the discussion we had after your first interview. So my name is Luke. I live actually opposite that island we were talking about, but I also have a spot at the island, so I can really recommend it. It's a wonderful place. Live here, as you can hear, I'm Dutch, I was born in Holland. I've been here for the last 20 or 25 years, and really enjoy this group and love Georgian Bluffs. I travel a lot, and every time it's just a wonderful place to come back to. So glad to have you on board, and see how we can use your. I was just discussing the other day. I thought, we have 23 and a half months left of you. So what can we do? Because the clock is ticking and there's a sense of urgency. So looking forward to working with you.
So Bob Gray is on my screen. I don't see him. I just see his initials. So Bob, I think you two have met.
Yes, yeah. Trevor and I had coffee. I think it was one day last week. So yeah, it was nice. I'm sorry I missed the interview. I felt badly for that, but I was out poking around in my kayak that day. So, anyways, yeah, it's pleased to meet Trevor. He mentioned that he has a degree from Mount A, and I said, I know where that is. My mother graduated from Mount A. So my family's from New Brunswick, so that was kind of nice. And I have a yearbook here, and I think it's 1935, but I'll have to find that. It's buried somewhere. But anyways, yeah, it was nice to talk with Trevor, and I gave him a couple of maps, and I showed him the geographic interpretation of southwestern Ontario and where Owen Sound is on that map. The elephant. So he's been welcome to Grey Bruce, Georgian Bluffs, geographically. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. Danuta.
You're muted, Danuta.
Not anymore. My name's Danuta Vallo, and I live on top of the W Hill in one of the heritage hills in Georgian Bluffs. And we've been here since 2005, so I guess it's 16 years now since we built our house here. And Georgian Bluffs is a really interesting area, and it's the longest I've ever spent at one address in my entire life. And I'm certainly committed to seeing Georgian Bluffs out as being a wonderful growing community, although I find it's difficult as a community because I don't have any sense of the community outside of this area, this part of Georgian Bluffs. And in a way, I'm really interested in seeing how there can be some common ground in Georgian Bluffs, because it's really 3 townships that got knitted together. And there's no city, no center, it's a very difficult, I imagine that is a difficult municipality to govern as a result, because there's often many conflicting interests. And I didn't necessarily mean to talk about that, but I think it's an important thing to note. Anyway, I look forward to working with you, Trevor.
Okay. Thanks, Danuta. Sue, have you met Steve other than in the initial interview?
No, I have not.
I'm going to do a little
No.
intro.
Welcome to Georgian Bluffs, Trevor. I'm going to kind of carry on what Danuta said. When you kind of get to know the combined Georgian Bluffs, there's a lot of tiny little communities within it, all the Crookshanks, the Shoaldices, and all of those little communities throughout Georgian Bluffs. So it does somewhat knit together because the people who have lived here long term know all the families, know all the background. So, and I think it's a very caring community. I'm looking forward to working further on the Climate Action Committee because I think there's a lot we can do to improve things for all of our community members. And I've actually lived here in the same place for 40 years, so I don't tend to move around, kind of stuck. So welcome to the township, and I look forward to working with you.
And I see Al's name on the list. I don't see him, but I think he's here. But I have a feeling that Steve and Al have already met.
That is correct. Thank
Yep.
you very much, Jen.
All right. And I'm not sure. I see a BA.
That's,
So that's Brian. He's doing our live stream.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know who that was. And L. There's an L. No?
I think the other one, and that's on the call, is Stephen Dahlmeyer, who's a director of operations. Who
Yeah,
Trevor
yeah, I see Steve, and I'm assuming Trevor has met Steve, but I have a circle with an L on it, and I don't know who that is. But if
Could be Luke.
Okay, it could be Luke. So yes, probably. Okay, great. So that I think we've done all the introductions then. Have I missed anyone? No? Oh, okay. So can we then go to the approval of the agenda and any additions to the agenda? So first approval of the agenda, I think we need to have a show of hands.
And you'll need to have a mover and a seconder for this one.
Thank you. This is why we need you, Carly. So can somebody move the approval of the agenda?
I would move so.
Who did that?
I would move so. It's Bob.
That's Bob. Thank you, Bob. A seconder?
I'll second it. It's
Thank you,
Danuta.
Danuta. And then do we need to vote on that, Carly?
Just a show of hands.
Show of hands. So show of hands for the approval of the agenda. All right. Are there any additions to the agenda? Now I have one that's kind of come via a bit of a discussion with Kathy, and that is just a brief discussion on the parking lot that we established, because her sense was that there's a bit of confusion about that. So if that could be added to the agenda. Number 3, declaration of pecuniary interests. Are there any declarations to be made? Nope. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. So recommendation that the minutes be approved. Does that need to be a motion as well, Carly?
Yes, please. You'll need a mover and a seconder to approve the June 22nd minutes as well as the June 9th. So 2 separate motions.
Okay, so could I have a motion for the June 9th? Is that the one, or July? June 9th? I don't even see those.
June 22nd.
Yep.
Okay, June 22nd and then July 9th. So motion for the June 22nd meeting.
I'll move that, Anne.
Thank you, Sue. Do we need a seconder?
Yes, we do.
Seconder, please.
Luke can second.
Luke, thank you, Luke. And show of hands for approval of those minutes. I can't see people, so I'm assuming it's all right. And then carried. All right, thank you. July 9th, a motion to approve, please.
Let's approve those.
That's Bob. A seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Danuta, and a show of hands. Okay, is that carried?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And to the best of my knowledge, we do not have any delegations. or correspondence or staff reports. Have any questions come in from the public, which is number 8?
No, they have not.
Right. All right, so that brings us to 9 and 9.1, which is the committee work plan, which the current version that we're working with is the June 17th, 2021. And I guess I would wonder, Trevor, whether you've actually seen the work plan.
Yes, I've reviewed the minutes all the way back until January, as well as other committees as well, that where the climate change kind of things spilled over into.
Okay, good. And I guess what I wonder about, because that's such a kind of a all-encompassing document, and this is a short meeting today, whether that should go on the agenda of our next meeting to kind of just really look at it a bit more in depth, and kind of start to break out kind of steps from that. So I wonder about other committee member thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is Luc, and I would support that. Also, it would be nice to have John. John had some ideas about it in terms of how do we make sure that we actually focus on mitigation as opposed to adaptation? How do we sequence that? How does it hang together? And then also it would be nice to hear from Trevor in terms of what's the plan in terms of making it happen, and what is the strategy in terms of, you know, we can't do it all at the same time. So what's an orderly sequence of events? And I think that John maybe had also some ideas in terms of sequencing, in terms of there is a way to do it apparently, and especially when you want to do you want to do adaptation and mitigation in parallel, or do you want to have it in sequence, that kind of stuff. So that would be probably good to have a separate discussion next time.
Right. Other comments on that? No? Okay. Just to let you know, on my screen, if there's a raised hand, I'm not seeing it. So I'm really counting on other people to kind of give me that input if someone wants to speak. I'm not seeing people on my screen, and I'm not seeing raised hands. So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. So please speak up if you do want to speak. So can we then, do we need to move, Carly, that this is going to be put onto the agenda for the next meeting for an in-depth discussion, and which would include trying to set some timelines and priorities on the work plan?
Yes, so we'll need a motion to defer this. So we need a mover and seconder for that.
So could I have a mover, please?
And could I just ask, Trevor, it says he's gone over everything. I'm just wondering if he can give us some comments or thoughts on what he thinks of what is in there in that work plan, and maybe what we should be thinking about adding to it or doing in the future. Not meaning to put you on the spot, Trevor, but just expecting you've got some thoughts about it.
Yeah, I've reviewed the work plan, and it's a very ambitious work plan. I'm going to speak to what I'm doing in trying to align with the work plan. So, and that's what I'll be speaking on the agenda as well. So maybe I can touch on that a bit more, and then we can go, if there are any questions, then we can talk about that then.
So are you talking about the agenda for this meeting, Trevor, or are you talking about the subsequent meeting?
That's right. There should be on the agenda a 2-year internal work plan, and then fiduciary duties. That should be business that I introduced.
Okay, I'm not seeing that. Oh, yes, I do. I am seeing that. Okay, all right. In some ways, it feels like we're kind of in that discussion now, given that the work plan is on the table. I'm wondering whether we can jump to 10.2, which is that part of the agenda. Would that be an appropriate thing, or is that out of order, Carly?
Are we going to discuss item 9.1, which is the committee work plan?
It feels like they go hand in hand. I don't think they're separate items. So my suggestion is that 9.11 and 9.1, we do that in conjunction with 10.2. And hear what Trevor has to say on that.
Personally, I'd like to stick to the current order because what's being said is I'm taking notes and that's going to inform my decisions. So if I can get that background and that information based from what I've read and what's being said could be different. So I prefer that we go in the order that's set.
Okay, fair enough. Given that, the work plan really needs to be fleshed out with you. So my suggestion would be that we're done with item number 1. And because there's really no action that we would take on that until we're hearing from Trevor and we can kind of refine that work plan based on his thinking.
And shall I give a bit of color for Trevor on the background of the plan?
Sure.
Just by way of background, Trevor. So we started this working group, of course, as you know, whenever it was, a year ago or so, and the idea was really to say, okay, so what are we going to do? And we didn't know if the council would approve any funding. We didn't know about what kind of programs we would be able to subscribe to, and if you would be able to come on board or your position would be created and filled. So that's all. So we basically said, okay, we need to have a bit of a plan. Otherwise, we operate in a vacuum. And that plan has been loosely followed, and it is two purposes. One was to have a forward-looking perspective and to say this is what we see ahead of us. But also, it was an effort to kind of document the steps that we had taken, so that in hindsight we will be able to say, well, these were milestone events and dates that we actually completed, but also there wasn't, we've always spoken warmly about any possibilities to collaborate, to learn from others, and also to allow others to learn from us, because ultimately we're all in the same boat. So it also served a little bit as an institutional memory for us, but also for others that say, okay, how do you actually go about it? Because we're all trying to figure out how to make this practical. So that was basically the idea and background. But we've kind of been waiting for your position to be created and filled to basically get real, and also to be able to have the approval of the council to subscribe to a PCP and BARC. And of course, that then has implications in terms of, okay, now we have these steps, or we have had the decisions, you're on board, now what? And for the last month or two, we have, or 3, we have kind of parked the work plan a little bit, because we wanted to make sure in terms of, and that's on the agenda as well, in terms of, so what's the first step, and what do we do in-house, and what do we ask consultants to do, and how do we sparingly deal with budget we have, and what are the ideas about mitigation versus adaptation, and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of have left it a little bit for you to review and to say, well, what do you make sense? And also for you to reach out to us and to say, well, this is what I can do. This is, this is ultimately, this is a municipal responsibility, but also how would you like to use the working group in terms of supporting you? So that's my way of, that's where I think that's a bit of a high level summary. If anybody else has to add something, please go ahead.
Any other comments on that?
No, I think what Luke said is spot on. We're looking for some direction, but this is kind of what we've been doing, and we're really pleased that that we've gotten this far and that we've got a climate action coordinator, Trevor, in place now. So now we can start to move ahead. So yeah, spot on.
Okay, so we are then ready to move on to new business. Okay, all right, so 10.1 is actually Trevor's role, the Climate Action Coordinator's role, and these are points coming in from Councillor Kathy Moore-Colburn. And the first is the review of the PCP process and the different milestones. Can I just confirm, have we registered with PCP at this point? I thought we had, but I just want to have that confirmed. Does someone know?
And through you to the committee, I believe we have. Brittany was doing that, and knowing Brittany and how efficient she is, I am 99.999% confident that that has been done.
So thank you, and I agree with her efficiency. So I think it's 100% done. All right. So review of the process is the first bullet point there, and so the first milestone of the PCP process, in my understanding, is doing the emissions inventory. And I guess part of that question then is how will that get completed?
Yes.
Was that Danuta?
Sorry, I'm mumbling to myself. That's a big question.
Yeah.
So I would suspect through you and to the rest of the committee, that's part of what Trevor will be talking about as part of his item and where he's going. So Trevor, did you want to speak to that now, or did you want to wait until, I mean, it looks to me, and I know what Anne was trying to do as a chair and trying to sort of consolidate 3 or 4 very similar agenda items into the one, because I think they're going to bleed into each other. Trevor, did you prefer to wait before you answer that? And I would suspect if we would, it would probably make some sense to reorder the agenda, because we would probably be well suited to hear from Trevor first in terms of his work plan and some of his thoughts before we get back to the climate action coordinator role and some of those different things. If the committee would agree through the chair, I would suggest that maybe we hear from Trevor right now, and then we can circle back to the actual role of the coordinator after we hear from Trevor.
Want to do a show of hands in terms of whether that would be okay? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
We're good. All right. So we're on for Trevor. So that's internal 2-year work plan, fiduciary duties at the request of Trevor. So Trevor, you're on.
Sure. Thank you, John. The reason I just kind of wanted to go at this time is just so I'm not overlapping with things that have already been said or done. And I'm taking notes here. And these are good notes. And it's giving me a lot of information to inform what I'm going to speak on next. So there will be, basically we'll be doing kind of a needs assessment. So assessing the capacity of the municipality to be able to undertake mitigation and adaptation, and what would be needed for a plan within the 2-year time frame that would be tangible and be approved by council, and what undertakings we would have to do that. So, and that would be exploring the RFP process and what would be involved in that plan as well. Is it going to be a mitigation, energy, and adaptation plan? Are we going to combine different aspects? Are we going to try to make it cross-cutting? What are we going to do in that aspect? So, and that's what the internal 2-year plan will do. And it will prioritize what we have funding for already and what is currently budgeted for. And then we'll explore beyond. So what we have the capacity to take on. So I'm just one person. And so it doesn't make sense to just have municipal staff doing things off their desk while they're doing their sole jobs and piling on additional work. So what can we do now in terms of our capacity? And engagement and consultation will be the center for the planning process. So I will be looking at creating an engagement plan. From what I understand in talking to Anne, there's a very huge group of like-minded individuals within the region, which is a great resource to tap into. But we also want to hear from other people in the community, not necessarily focused on climate change. Maybe they're focused on the economy right now or on social or different aspects and what they feel that should take shape in terms of a plan. So we have this great advisory with a bunch of people that are very knowledgeable on climate change in other aspects, but it's also important to take into other stakeholders and how allow them to steer this process as well. So, and we'll be looking at that in the internal plan. So engagement and consultation process. And then what we can present to council that will be realistic and getting approved by council as well. So to go back to Deputy Mayor Sue Carleton's question about me reviewing the plan that you guys have put forward, I think it's a great plan. It's very ambitious and motivated. And it will have to take into account different things like mitigation, adaptation, I think like Luke mentioned. But what I'm not seeing is partnerships. So like I said, there is a great resource of individuals and groups spread out amongst the region, and those are possible partnerships, but I'm thinking about more local partnerships. So if we're to assign jobs or tasks, it can't just be the municipality all the way down or this working group. It has to be other partners. So we have to look at who are those partners going to be to take on some of these roles. So, and I think that will generate much more buy-in as well. And then funding as well. So we do have funding for some projects already. Kemble Arena is one example. There is funding, $90,000 from the province that we can apply for to do the energy plan. So we should be aligning with the funding that exists already. And we have to manage the expectations of what we're releasing to the public. So if we do break down the committee's work plan, then those are things that the public can review and they are going to want to see results. And if we're not able to deliver, or I have to go every time when I'm talking to the public or to meetings and say ongoing, I think that is not going to be conducive to what we're trying to achieve. So we got to be very realistic in what goes into the public committee plan. And I think it should be much more broad than very, I think the internal plan should be much more narrowed down. So, and yeah, so that's just kind of what I've gone through in that part of the agenda, the internal planning process. And so, and also we'll be going through the municipalities. So I, like everybody in this world, have a boss. And so we'll be working together to get the 2-year internal plan approved and then carry it out. So if there are any questions on that, I'd be more than welcome to answer.
So again, I don't see any hands, so I can't.
What do you think the time frame would be to get that plan together, Trevor? Have you got any ideas, like months or weeks or?
It depends on so the 2-year internal plan, that'll be done pretty much by the end of this week or by the end of next week. Well, I'll talk to Stephen and then we'll get that narrowed down at how we can fulfill it within the operational. So I fall under operations under the umbrella of the municipality. So how are we going to do that from an operational standpoint? And then of course involving the committee as an advisory as well. And then we would have to explore what we want in a plan. And then the plan is the ultimate goal of this 2-year period. I think it's very achievable within a year and a half. Just depends on, are we going to rely on consultants? Are we going to do some of the work in-house? Are we going to apply for funding to help with doing the plan? And so once we've narrowed that down, then we can put a time frame on it and a cost. And of course, the plan itself will have a cost attached to it as well.
Right, and you're going to have a pretty good idea of where funding might be available to help out with different components then, eh? Of there must be money out there that the municipality can apply for. Yeah,
there is definitely. And like I said, partnerships can definitely reduce the load. So for example, me and Anne spoke on a report that is unreleased from the University of Guelph, and they have a department committed to doing work with rural communities. And I mean, that with a lot of them are diverting resources to the GTA and Peel region. We want to look at organizations that are diverting their resources to rural small town. So, I mean, FCM does have a focus on that, but that's where we want to work within. If I have to call somebody and they're using all their time to help Hamilton or Chatham-Kent, then I don't necessarily want to work with them if they're not going to prioritize me just the same.
Okay.
So Trevor, when you mentioned about partnerships, the County of Grey has a committee that is just beginning to put focus on climate action there as well. So I think some of the research and studies that they've had done already would be of benefit to us. So we maybe need to get that connection made. So, and I can't remember the name of the person up there now that's looking after it. So we'll have to find that out.
It's Linda Lousden, I think is her name.
Thank you.
And she just came on board in July. And I know that Scott Taylor, who is their senior planner, and Linda will be coming to the Grey Bruce Climate Action Network fourth, I think it's the fourth Monday, I think, in September to present on that plan. But you can actually get onto their plan online. And they have made a commitment that any data that is relevant to Georgian Bluffs, they will share with us, because they've done a lot of data collection, which may then help with that milestone number 1 for PCP. Any other comments, questions for Trevor?
I have a comment. This is Luke N.
Yeah.
So Trevor, I'm just a little bit, just to clarify. So we have a plan for the plan, and that's the end of next week, or you have a plan for the plan. Then we need to have a plan, like as in climate action plan. And then we talk about implementation. And then we talk about monitoring. So I'm just thinking about how to sequence it, because if we go about Campbell Arena, I see the partly as an implementation, which is very important. And partnerships, if it's partnerships for the plan, great, but we can't have, well, I would think that we first need to have a plan about what these partnerships are actually trying to achieve before we dive into partnerships. So, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but I'm just thinking, okay, so the question to you is, if you have a plan for the plan by the end of next week, do we still need to have a work plan the way we had it before, or do we say your plan for the plan actually is the kind of the work plan to develop the climate action plan?
So the internal work plan is just for me. So if in operational capacity it's in the best interest to share it with the committee, then we'll share it with the committee. Or if I'm providing updates to Stephen and Stephen is taking those updates to council, then Stephen can do that. And he can just ask me, Trevor, I need a 1-pager bullet point. Yeah. What are you working on right now? What have we done? I give that to Stephen and Stephen can take that to council. And that all happens internally. So, and then we'll just identify what can the committee help with in that term. So for example, if there are 3 options for energy planning that are available, then we could present those in a report, take that to committee, and committee could advise what they feel are the best option for doing an energy plan. And then I take that under advisement and we look at trying to work with that under operations. If it just doesn't work with operations, if Stephen says, we just can't do it like that, then we'll have to make an executive decision and we'll have to keep going. So my 2-year work plan is just keeping me going in a forward direction rather than getting bogged down mitigation versus adaptation and things like that. We're just trying to see what can we achieve now in a 2-year time frame. And the plan before council should be the ultimate goal. Without an approval from council and mayor and council, then we really don't have that ability to move forward. And council is going to be looking for stakeholder buy-in and engagement with the community. If we've only engaged one group of individuals who are, I would say, very like-minded, then I would say when that goes in front of council, they may say, you know what, we want you to take this back, look at it and revise, and we want to re-look at it 2 months from now. So we lose 2 months in that time frame. So if we do it right the first time, I feel that we're not going to go down that road.
Right. Okay. And so my only point is maybe to then discuss during next meeting to what extent our internal work plan needs to be revised to meet your work plan, right? So that those two talk to each other.
I believe you have a question or a remark.
Yeah, sorry. Just if I could just step in for a minute through the chair to the committee. I think we're from a visual perspective and an optics perspective. I think this committee develops the roadmap in terms of where you want to be for Georgian Bluffs in the future. Trevor then defines, based on his expertise, how we're going to get there and when we can get there. So the committee continues to develop the overarching sort of guidance, the vision, where you want the township to go, some of the big boulders that you want the staff to sort of tackle, and then Trevor, with his expertise, is the person that navigates us to get us where you want to get to as a township. And so I don't know if that helps a little bit, but this committee continues to work on the overarching, the roadmap, the big items, and Trevor then works incrementally to get us there in the most efficient and effective way, either through partnerships, through grant applications, through his expertise of doing things of that sort. And that's how the two sort of melt in together.
Yeah, that's an excellent explanation, Al. We don't want to get bogged down in minutia. You guys don't want to... Administrative capacities within municipalities is quite complex, and it's better that I move through those processes than having you have to move through with me, because then we do get bogged down in that minutia and we don't achieve. But what he said is right. Under the existing framework that we're looking for a vision, and we're trying to put our own stamp on this as a municipality that we can take out to funding partners or to other municipalities to show them that this is something that we came up with. This is something that the municipality supports and is proud of doing.
May I make a comment?
Danuta, yes.
Yeah. I just want to thank you, Trevor, and for Luke for bringing up the conundrums that we're still, I think, struggling a little bit with the roles of everybody. And I really appreciate, and I totally understand the operational aspect of this. And in fact, that is action. That's really getting things happening, which I think is very important for people to start seeing. In terms of partnerships, that we've come across quite a number through the network that Anne mentioned, and Northern Bruce Peninsula is currently working on their missions Step 1 milestone. And they're doing it on their own with help through the funding obtained by the Biosphere Conservancy or Association. I get them mixed up sometimes. And in Bruce County, they've got a really interesting project in hydrogen energy going on. So there's some really interesting things going on. And certainly I can see partnerships. It would be really interesting to see what kind of partnerships you can find in the more diverse areas of our community, the people that we really need to get on board in order for us to be successful in Georgian Bluffs. And that's where the creative approaches are needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Go ahead, Trevor.
There are no other, I can move on to the second point, and then we can move through the agenda, the fiduciary duties, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So fiduciary duties. So this position is just not a symbolic gesture, and some of you might be aware of that. There is legal grounding for this position to exist. And I think it's going to be more the norm that these positions do exist. So if we look at what GTA, Peel, Hamilton, everybody's doing, integrated this position within their municipalities already. And so it's just normal operating procedure. And we want to get that to standard operating procedure here. So I'm just going to rattle off some legislation under review assessment that I did that makes this position practical. So number one is the provincial policy statement, and that falls under the Planning Act, but it does mention climate change in the provincial policy statement. And it's more focused on affordable housing, but climate change is there. So we also have the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. So that also does mention greenhouse gas emission reduction. We have the asset management for municipal infrastructure. That mentions within it that undertaking the asset management, that we look at something, we're building things that are resilient and taking into account future climate. So that's something that the municipality would follow. And the provincial government is also doing right now their own multi-sector provincial climate change impact assessment. So, and it's good that we're doing it as well, so we can kind of lockstep with what the province is doing and making sure that the province is doing it correctly, and then that we're getting that good data that's being generated as a result. The broader public sector, and we kind of touched on this earlier. So the energy reporting and conservation demand management plans. So we, as a municipality, do have to provide baseline data on energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. That's basically an audit. So that's not actually an energy plan. An energy plan would be, how do we get to that reduction? And under my thinking, that's what a mitigation plan would do. An energy plan is just more focused on energy. So we would have to make that kind of call. Do we want to just look at, can we fit that good baseline data under the CDM plan for the municipality? Can we fit that under mitigation? Or do we have to go and do a separate energy plan for the municipality? And like I said, there is money out there, $90,000, that we could do that. Or it could just fall under the mitigation umbrella of the plan. So that's something that we'll have to decide maybe next meeting on the agenda. And that'd be a good kind of segue into what we want to talk about. And of course, you know, the Made in Ontario Environment Plan, which is at the very high provincial level, and Ontario's flooding strategy, and underneath that, the multi-sector provincial climate change impact assessment. So under all those, that makes this position not a symbolic gesture, but something that is practical. It does not make sense for example, Stephen's staff to be doing this off their desk on the side when it could be done in-house under one position, and then have that committed energy behind that and integrating with the climate change plan that we want to achieve. So, and I just wanted to state that under the fiduciary responsibility we have as a municipality to do that.
Any comments? Actually, I'm just going to comment that I appreciate the clarification that you made around the energy plan, Trevor, because what you did, I think, is differentiate that it's actually made up of two things. One, doing the audit, but also then moving into how you do the reduction. And I think that's kind of how you were defining an energy plan. Yes.
And if we got that $90,000, for example, so if me and Stephen sat down, we said, you know what, I think we should apply for this with Al, and we did, and we got that money, then we could have that energy plan all done up. If it's just better to put it under mitigation and look at our baseline data and how we can reduce that, because we're already going through the PCP milestones, then we could do it that way as well. So there are arguments for either, and I think we can put that on the agenda for next time, and we could use that as a segue into talking about mitigation and adaptation.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
This is Luc, and maybe one comment, and Trevor, I think that's it's more about the and it's maybe not related to the fiduciary duties, but the way how we have been talking, at least as a group, about it, in terms of your role and the climate action over and above the you know, the Is this something that goes over and above the normal duties of the municipal staff? Or alternatively, the way we have been talking a little bit about it is, this is not something that anybody, and that includes us, do kind of in your spare time. We're really hoping that the municipality takes the lead in integrating this into everybody's job description, right? So this is not something that you're responsible for climate change. Steve is responsible as much as Jen is, as much as John is, as much as Brian is, and really kind of, we hope that in many ways your role is part related to the external stakeholders, but also really about how do you use the leverage that the municipality has, which is tremendous in terms of bylaws and zoning and planning and operations, and from waste management to snow removal. How do you integrate it really so that it becomes a shared responsibility? So I just wanted to, just by way of background, that's how we have been talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. I think what you're referring to is mainstreaming. Mainstreaming is great in practice. It's really a lot harder to do because within a municipality you have silos, and it's a matter of breaking down those silos and being able to integrate within the municipal strategy. So the municipality does have a strategy, and so we want to work within that as well, to align the climate strategy with that. So, and then that helps break down those barriers. So, for example, the province put out in 2020 that provincial policy statement that I referred to under the Planning Act. Who's actually read it and followed it? And where are the teeth to actually make it happen? So it's one thing to say something and put it on paper. It's another thing to do it. And so in those silos that I'm referring to, they're quite hard to break down. But I look within the operational department. There are good people that have environmental backgrounds that work within operations within the municipality. So to get them on board and already doing this, I think we're already there within the operational department, but also moving through the municipality because there are many departments and within the county as well, and just breaking down those barriers as need be. Al, sorry.
Al, is your hand up?
Yes, it is, Anne. Thank you very much. I think we've spoken about this in the past, and I think as a management team, we've talked about this as well as, what are the strategies that we can to bring an environmental lens to everything that's going towards council. And part of what we've talked about is, if the committee members aren't familiar, there's various sections within our reports now that go to council with various recommendations, some financial comments, legal comments, things of that, depending on the report. And part of what we've talked about as a management team is putting in a standard in our report template for every report is sort of a climate section or something along those lines, so that as reports are moving forward, does it go to Trevor, for example, for his comments? 9 times out of 10, he might say, there's nothing here from a climate action perspective, but in some cases he mightn't say, here's how it fits into what we're trying to do as a township on the climate file as well. So that's something that we're actively working on in terms of revising our report template that will go to council, that will attempt to give an environmental lens to every report that's going forward. So that's very much on our radar right now.
That's excellent. And I just wanted to ask Trevor, have you seen Dr. John Anderson's report called Planning Through a Climate Lens?
I can jot it down. I may or may have not seen it. I've probably read.
It would be a good one to take a look at, and I can get it to you. I have a copy, or I have it online that I can get it to you, because that's exactly what he's talking about. What Al was saying is that every department looks at everything they do, in addition to financial, in addition to kind of all of that, they also look at it through a climate lens. So yeah, that's excellent.
And like Al was saying, it might not be practical to use an environmental climate lens in some aspects. It'd be like saying, going out of the pandemic, we have to have everything have a health lens attached to it. And I mean, everybody would be supportive of that, but it might actually slow things down in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So, I mean, if it makes sense, for example, Kemble Arena needs a climate lens because it does have federal funding attached to it, and all federal funding does have a climate lens. So that's definitely something we could look at. If there's something within the municipality that is trying to get underway, for example, drainage, stormwater management, then stormwater management, definitely. If we're seeing a 10% increase in precipitation and, by 2050, then definitely we should be using a climate lens in that aspect and along those roads. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, we would have a lens for practically everything. So, and we have to be realistic in that sense because we are coming out of the pandemic. So money is tight. We're relying on a lot of funding and stimulus that's coming out of the government. And, jobs are a priority, as well as healthcare is going to be a huge priority. The election will be, I think, announced for September. So that's something that we're going to have to look at as well, is how is everything going to pivot in that aspect. So, and that could change this entire process entirely. So there are these externalities. So it's nice that we have this nice group within a very nice region within the township, but there are also those external factors that are happening around us all the time that we have to take into account.
Okay, thank you. Any last comments on this or questions?
Yeah, Bob here. This may not be the right place to speak to this, but when we're introducing ourselves this morning as committee members, we're all kind of clustered up here at the top end of Georgian Bluffs. And, we also have Old Sarawak Township, and we have the former geographic township of Derby. And I think that, I don't know, from a township perspective, we're just kind of skewed up this way. I think making sure that we touch base or identify these different groups that are located or interest groups that are located throughout the entire municipality is going to be very important. So it doesn't look like we're a bunch of elitists or something sitting up here at the top end of the township worried about climate change, and everybody else is trying to keep the wolf away from the door paying the bills, or whatever. But maybe we should be doing some head scratching and trying to write down all the different groups that we think could be approached, like the different agricultural groups or something, and the ATV groups and the snowmobile clubs and the ski clubs, but just come up with a whole list of different possible partners or whatever to give to Trevor. Maybe we can come up with a list of 60, 70 different groups out there that we could maybe eventually reach out to at some point, because we're going to have to get these people on board somehow. We're talking to the converted on this committee, but there's lots of people that are not the converted out there. So this may not be the place to say that, but I just wanted to get that thought out there. And I think that all of us would have some pretty good ideas of who the different groups could be, to identify them, just to give Trevor a heads up in terms of these people should be out there.
Actually, Bob, I think that that might be a role that our Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Team could help play as well, and maybe do a really good think about how we could reach south, because I think those two municipalities are south. Yeah, so we can put that on the agenda for our next meeting as well. Okay, so my sense is then, Trevor, from what you're saying, is that the next 2 weeks you will be working with Steve to kind of come up with kind of your next steps and how your next steps then will gel with the work plan that we've put in place. And that our next meeting then will be a really good discussion on that.
Yeah, I would say that's a good summary of what we're trying to do here.
Okay, good, thank you. So then if we go back to the beginning of number 10, it feels like 10.1 in terms of kind of reviewing of PCP, the BART process adaptation decision. Well, maybe those two are definitely part of the agenda for the next meeting as you develop your work plan.
Definitely, and those will be in the internal work plan as well. Yeah. So that's been done in the past, and I'm committed to doing that. Those processes, for example, the Milestone Framework through PCP, a municipality can sign up. It's very easy to sign up. They don't actually have to do it. So there's nothing committing them to it. But if FCM has seen that you've signed up, and for example, there is Green Municipal Fund funding for, let's say, an affordable housing project, and we haven't moved through the milestones or haven't even attempted to, then FCM is going to take that into account. And I'm still on FCM working group, so I'm doing a presentation for FCM in October. for the release of one of their guides that I helped them develop. And I'm also on their adaptation working group as well. So it's good for FCM to know your name, and it's good to get recognition from them as well. So when those green municipal fund applications do come up, that we can do those applications, whether it's brownfields to affordable housing to recreation. We want to be working through those, and with BARC as well. So the ICLEI framework is just that. It's a framework, and they provide you resources. It would just be the same if we were going down the energy planning process and we partnered with Clean Air Partnership. They would provide us resources. They're not going to necessarily do it for us. They're going to just give us advice, and they're going to give us, a general framework that works. And then we would move through that. But like I said, I want this committee here to take that framework, the ICLEI framework or the BARC framework, and really let's put our stamp on it and just not make it a very cookie cutter generic framework, but something that speaks to coming out of the pandemic, that would really make the community resilient.
Okay. People good with that? All right. So the last part of that was the decision-making process, and actually that comes from Kathy as well. And I just in her email, when she was saying she couldn't make the meeting, she was suggesting a kind of a decision-making framework, and she calls it a PIE. And I don't know whether you've heard of that framework, Trevor. And it's basically assess, plan, implement, evaluate, in that order. I know one actually similar, and it's STOPS, and it is stop, think, options, plan, and then evaluate. And just because there's going to be so much stuff coming at you, that having a framework about thinking about, I'm going to do this one or not that one, would be a really good thing to kind of have in your back pocket. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I would just kind of ask this committee, because there is going to be so much coming down the tube.
Mm-hmm.
Like, realistically, look at coming out of the pandemic. What can we do economically, socially, and environmentally for the community, and to build that resilience? And then as well, looking at the primary, impacts of climate change, which are the warming and which are the precipitation. We could get lost in the ancillary stuff. Like, we could go down the invasive species path or all these different pathways, but we really need to focus this, because if we present, for example, a plan to council that is 1/4 invasive species or 1/3 hydrogen development, we're not boiling it down to the very simple points that this needs to come about. So for example, if there is, like I said, a drainage project, we're looking at warming and we're looking at precipitation, and then ancillary impacts as well. So what other environmental impacts from a changing climate are going to impact that project? And we kind of need to be focused on that aspect. And I just kind of ask of that, because we could take this in all different directions, but it's good to have that kind of focus.
Yeah. Okay. Any comments? All right. Do we need to do motions here, Carly, or are we working through this new business appropriately? Have we
Yes,
lost?
the only motion left on the agenda is a motion to adjourn, so you're okay for now.
Yeah, and can I just make one clarification? And this was actually at Kathy's request as well. Several meetings ago, we established what we called the parking list, and she felt that there might be some confusion around that parking list, as thinking it was an actual to-do list, and that anything that went in there, we wanted to actually have people act on. And it was actually established as a list to bring things back to the table to discuss at the appropriate time. And they may become actions, but not necessarily. So just wanting to clarify that. Trevor, you may have seen that to-do list connected to the minutes, but that was the function of it. And I know some of the stuff that went on there, I think people called low-hanging fruit. So maybe kind of small things that could become actions and used to help facilitate engagement. But again, they need to come back to the table at the right time for discussion to determine whether they're actions or not actions.
Yeah, I think in FCM we call them quick wins, and kind of me and Al discuss this. But I think the best way to do this is always be implementing. If you do, for example, if we do baseline energy and greenhouse gas emissions, to me that's an implementation. We've taken the time, we've devoted the resources and the funding that we had available to do that. To me, that's an implementation, and to celebrate it along the way. So if we hit milestone 1 for FCM, we do the readiness scale, and we've established where we are. I think that in itself is an implementation. So, and I think you always want to be implementing and moving forward in that direction, but it's definitely the larger overarching goals that we want to do. That is what I will need advisory support on, and then we'll develop the resources around those.
Okay. Any comments? Any?
And if I could speak to that, my understanding of that parking list was certain items were mentioned during meetings, and we were putting them on that list so that we didn't forget to go back and take a look at them, that we felt they were important. So it wasn't so much a to-do list as more of a reminder list to make sure that we didn't lose some of these things as we thought about them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Good. All right. Any last minute comments before we move to a motion for adjournment? I don't think we have a closed session. No. So any last comments, thoughts?
Well, I just say, it's Bob here. I just say that I'm really excited about this process, and I'm really glad that Trevor's here. And I think that there's hope on the horizon. I think we're going to get something done here. So good work.
Yeah, I echo that. Yeah. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I do believe Al had a question.
Oh, sorry. I can't. Yeah. Thank you, Al.
No, that's okay, Ann. I was going to echo Bob's comments as well. I wanted to welcome Trevor to the team. I know he's going to be a tremendous asset for the township. And to be honest with you, I wanted to thank council as well, because council took a leap of faith here and they put their money where their mouth is, and they, through the action of hiring Trevor for the next couple of years, has really demonstrated that climate action is something important for this township and for this council, and to that, council should be recognized as well. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to council. Thank you very much for this committee, and thank you very much for Trevor. We're looking forward to having you on board, and I'm sure with you and Steve, you guys will contribute significantly to this township for years to come. You'll leave a lasting legacy for sure.
Yeah, I agree, Al. I mean, I think it's wonderful to actually be part of a municipality that right now is being seen as a leader around climate change in Grey and Bruce counties. It's really, really wonderful. So let's move forward. Let's keep the momentum going. And thank you to Trevor for being part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, Anne, just a note to the committee about the PCP program.
Yes.
I can confirm that we sent correspondence to FCM on July 26th. And within that motion from council, the 2 appointed points of contact were our CAO and Councillor Moore Coburn.
Okay. Thank you, Carly. Okay, so a motion to adjourn. Who would like to move?
I can move a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Danuta. Do we need a seconder?
I'll second it, Ann.
Thank you, Sue. All in favor?
Okay. And when's the next meeting?
The next meeting is August the 24th at 1 p.m., Bob.
Okay, thank you.
So that's not too long away. So Trevor's got his plate full.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So everyone have a good weekend. I think it's not supposed to rain for at least a couple of days. So enjoy it.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.